Hey, everybody, and greetings from San Francisco, where I am on tour. And I just have a brief episode for you today. It's not one of my normal interviews or even a normal solo cast, but this hasn't been a normal week. So if you're listening to this in real time, there have been some incredibly tragic and violent events in the Middle East, in Israel and Palestine this week. And I think most people probably know the facts, so I'm not going to dwell on that. But it's been very difficult for me, even though I have no historical or ethnic affiliation with either of those groups. I've just felt this really strongly. And even as I record this right now, I can feel it in my stomach, this real, this kind of destruction, like my stomach is eating itself. It's really quite an unpleasant sensation. And there have been a lot of different feelings I've had. And I listened to Jeff Salzman, who is a collaborator of mine. He's the host of the Daily Evolver podcast that I now co-host with him sometimes. I'm actually about to record an episode with him later today about this topic. But he recorded an episode yesterday with, I think it's called the Developmental Alliance. And there's a snippet of it that I just want to share today. And I think it's going to be really helpful and useful if you're in this position, as I am, of having a lot of feelings and maybe a lot of contradictory feelings. And part of Jeff's integral perspective is that there are multiple consciousnesses online in each one of us. And, I think part of his message that I'm hearing and learning from is that we can't just pick the best one or the highest one or the one that's most in line with who we want to be. These things are just operating. And I have all kinds of feelings on all kinds of these levels of consciousness that are operating. And it's important. Obviously we don't want to act on all of them or any of them, but it's important to acknowledge the feelings and feel the feelings and express the feelings. And this developmental lens that he gives us has really helped me to do that. And so I just want to share it with you. And so take this as an invitation to a kind of meditation or a bodily sensing meditation, and go through these different levels, notice them in yourself, and feel it, like really feel it and express what each of these pieces in you wants to do and how it wants to react. And my idea is that not only will you feel better as I feel better, but we'll have a greater understanding of how other people are feeling and reacting. And even though I don't think it's wise to react from these places, it's important to acknowledge that some other people are. Okay, so gratitude to Jeff for letting me use this. Thank you.
I'm going to start by doing the simplest of integral practices. And that is to become aware of where we are at this very moment as we relate to this situation at hand. So I invite you to do that. And we've all been marinating, or at least certainly aware of, the story as it's unfolding. And there are a lot of, sensibilities that integral thinking helps us to differentiate and integrate. So we'll start with the sensitive self. And this is our green postmodern self that is horrified by the suffering and recoils and even tries to avoid it or becomes depressed at all the atrocities. I'm not going to dwell on all of it. It's all quite very much online in the culture. And so we want to be aware of that part of ourselves. And we want to be aware of our rational self, the modern self, which is just in a way confused by all of this. How could it happen? What went wrong? Who was responsible? What broke down? What are the ramifications? How can we fix this? How threatened are we? And that is, the self that is also online at the same time. And then there's the righteous self, or the blue traditional consciousness that goes automatically to who's to blame. Our blue traditional mind is always busy figuring out who's right and who's wrong. And actually, there's not a lot of figuring in a way. It's funny. It's self-evident. It just arises. The dots are connected automatically in our blue ethnocentric hearts. We know who the heroes are and who the villains are, and we tell a story from there. We start with the heroes and villains and tell the story from there. And maybe we tell the story that starts with the incursions on Saturday, or the occupation, or the founding of Israel in 1947, or Judea 3,000 years ago. But that comes online too, and we can feel into that ethnocentric self. Who do I relate to here? The Israelis, the Arabs, the white people, the people of color. We can see this in the culture, that this blue self there's a big blue strata in America and in all over the world. Most of the world is pre-modern in this sense. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second here. But I want to also get into the final stage that we're going to feel into, and that's the red level, the bloodlust that gets activated. And we think, fuck those fuckers. We're right to fight back against evil. They've been doing it to us way too long. We have to fight back with whatever we have. A lot of anger. This is the world of vengeance, recrimination, again, bloodlust, revenge. And we can see and feel into each of these energetics and worldviews, really. And we could see them in each other. We can see them in social media. We can, see that they're often at odds. And this is where integral consciousness comes in handy, because at integral, all of that is welcome in a sense, in the sense that integral helps all of these energetics make more sense, to fly in formation. And I like the word, there's a certain way in which it's powered by faith. It is for me, and I love that word faith, that sheer awareness of more, of including more of the story and the energies that are at play in real time, happening under their own power, and how you could hold all of that and more of that is what is the road to being more wise, more compassionate, and more part of the solution and less part of the problem. And this is especially important because we see that all of these forces are not only at work in ourselves, but in the situation itself, the world at large, and that it is in various proportions and various cultures and stories, and often violently combustible, as we are seeing now.